In this debut episode of our podcast, A Point in Time, we dive into one of history's strangest true disasters, the Great Molasses Flood of 1919 in Boston. Yes, an actual tsunami of sticky syrup tore through a city neighborhood. Picture Boston's North End, January 1919. It's cold, but not that Hallmark movie pretty kind of cold. This is slushy, noisy, steam rising from manhole covers kind of winter. You've got streetcar bells clanging, horses clopping, kids yelling in Italian, Irish, a dozen languages. It smells like coal smoke, fish from the harbor, and sweet, like burnt sugar. Because towering over this very crowded, very working-class neighborhood is a giant steel tank full of molasses. And when I say giant, I mean this thing is basically a metal apartment building. Roughly 50 feet tall, about 90 feet across, holding over 2 million gallons of molasses. It belongs to the Purity Distilling Company, which is part of U.S. Industrial Alcohol. A very wholesome name, but with a very unwholesome safety record.
People in the neighborhood are used to it. Kids play around the base, workers walk underneath it to get to the elevated train, families live right next door. The tank even leaks so much that kids sometimes come by with cups or little containers to scoop up the sticky drips. It's like the world's worst chocolate fountain. You know, if the chocolate could kill you. It's just after noon on January 15th, 1919. The air is unusually warm for winter, around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and the streets are busy. Some longshoremen are working down by the waterfront. There's a city worker named George Leahy near the tank, taking his lunch break. A firehouse, Engine Company 31, sits practically in its shadow. In the distance, a rumbling starts. Some people later say they thought it was machine gun fire, or a train coming off the tracks. One man describes it like a roar, a grating, grinding roar. The enormous tank suddenly lets go. The steel plates pop apart with this horrible metallic shriek. Rivets fire off like bullets, and in an instant, 2+ million gallons of molasses are free. They don't ooze out. That's the weird, surprising thing. This isn't Winnie the Pooh stuck in the honey pot. This is fluid dynamics being like, oh hey, you forgot I exist. A wave, thick, dark brown, and moving at about 35 miles per hour, rips into the streets. Estimates say up to 25 feet high, sometimes described as reaching around 40 feet in places, as it slams into buildings. Imagine standing there, and suddenly a wall of syrup taller than a 2-story house is charging at you as fast as a city bus. It shatters the support columns of the elevated railway. It picks up a freight car like it's made of cardboard. A nearby building gets knocked off its foundation. The molasses smashes into the firehouse, basically folding the first floor like a cheap lawn chair and trapping the firefighters inside. People are literally swept off their feet and tossed around in this sticky, heavy mess. Horses are swallowed and suffocate. Some victims are thrown into lampposts or walls with enough force to be killed on impact. Others are trapped where they fall. And here's where the dark humor of the situation runs into its limits. Because as bizarre as it all sounds, a city destroyed by a dessert ingredient, this is deadly. 21 people lose their lives, and about 150 are injured. For those who survive, the horror is almost surreal. Rescuers later talk about trying to wade through molasses that's waist deep, and every step is a fight. It's like trying to run in a nightmare where your legs won't work. The more you struggle, the more it pulls at you. People can't get their mouths free to breathe. Some suffocate, others drown. And yet, the scene looks absurd. Buildings half covered in brown goo, horses frozen mid-fall, carts and debris stuck like flies in amber. So you have this combination of slapstick visuals, like something out of a silent film, and very real human tragedy. Neighbors claw at the molasses with their bare hands, trying to reach people they can hear calling out. Firefighters trapped in their own collapsed station. And all of it caused not by an earthquake or a hurricane, but by a company tank full of sticky syrup that, until that moment, just felt like part of the background. The obvious question is, how on earth did a disaster this strange even happen? To understand why there was a giant ticking time bomb of sugar goo in a crowded neighborhood, you gotta look at what molasses was doing for big business in 1919. This wasn't just for gingerbread cookies. Molasses was industrial gold. You ferment it to make industrial alcohol. That can become rum, sure, but also things like explosives and other wartime materials. During World War I, demand for industrial alcohol had gone way up. So companies like U.S. Industrial Alcohol were like, let's store as much as physically possible. Anywhere we can get away with it. The north end spot was convenient, right by the harbor, easy to offload molasses from ships, then pump it into this monster tank, and later move it by pipeline or rail. Less convenient, it was smack in the middle of a neighborhood full of immigrant families, kids, shops, and a busy street. But, zoning laws back then were basically, can you fit it there? Cool, it's fine. Now, the tank itself. If you imagine a responsible company ordering a huge storage tank, you might picture engineers, blueprints, careful tests. What actually happened was not that. The steel plates were thinner than what later experts said they should have been. The tank was reportedly never properly filled with water first to test for leaks and pressure. This is like buying a giant inflatable pool and saying, we'll find out if it works when 30 kids are in it. When they did fill it with molasses, surprise, it leaked. A lot. Sticky streams of molasses ran down the sides. Workers complained. Neighbors noticed. Instead of fixing the underlying problem, the company's solution, according to later testimony, was to paint the tank brown so the leaks wouldn't be as visible. Which is like putting a patterned tablecloth over a broken leg and saying, problem solved. On top of lousy construction, you've got temperature. Molasses is thick, but it still behaves like a liquid under the right conditions. Days before the disaster, a shipment of warm molasses arrived and was pumped into the tank, which already had a lot of colder molasses inside from the winter. So you've got this big steel container, cold on the outside from January air, warm, sticky stuff going in, gases from fermentation building pressure, and metal that was never really strong enough in the first place. It's kind of like doing the Mentos in a soda bottle trick, but instead of a plastic bottle, you're using a rusty trash can. Later experts argued that the rapid temperature change, warm molasses meeting cold tank walls, could have increased pressure and stress on the already weak steel. And for months before, there'd been ominous sounds. People said they heard groaning, rumbling, weird noises from inside the tank. You don't have to be a structural engineer to think, hey, maybe that's bad. At the heart of it is very human negligence. U.S. Industrial Alcohol wanted that tank up fast to cash in on wartime demand. So corners got cut. Poor design, rushed construction, minimal safety testing, complaints brushed aside. And the people who lived and worked around it, most of them immigrants with little political power, were the ones placed right under the danger zone. There's this grim irony. The executives far away saw molasses as numbers in a ledger. Gallons in, profit out. On the ground, it was literally part of the neighborhood. Kids played by it, workers ate lunch in its shadow, firefighters slept next door. When it failed, it didn't hit the boardroom. It hit families, laborers, and local businesses who had absolutely no say in whether that thing should have been towering over their homes. So when people later asked, how could this possibly have happened? The short answer was, because someone decided saving money was worth more than making sure a 2 million gallon tank wouldn't explode over a city street. In the immediate aftermath, Boston looks like a desert has declared war on the city. Rescuers rush in, police, firefighters, soldiers from a nearby barracks, volunteers, and they're all suddenly discovering that wading through molasses is like trying to sprint through half-set concrete. People are stuck, face down, barely able to move. Horses are panicking, which, by the way, is terrifying even when they're not coated in syrup. Some rescuers use boards to try to stay on top of the sticky surface. Others literally crawl. Knives, axes, bare hands, anything to dig people out. They pull survivors, and heartbreakingly, they also pull out bodies. The search goes on for days, and even after that, the cleanup just keeps going. Crews bring in salt water from the harbor and fire hoses to try to dilute and wash away the mess. They use sand on the streets, like it's a snowstorm, except the snow is brown and smells like a bakery crashed into a shipyard. For weeks, molasses gets tracked everywhere, on boots, wagon wheels, trolley cars. It sticks to doorknobs, clings to banisters. There are stories of people finding it on subway platforms, on telephone pay stations, far from the actual tank site. The harbor itself reportedly turns brown. It's one of those scenes where, if you saw it in a comedy movie, you'd think,
Okay, that's a bit much. But this was real. The city is literally and emotionally stuck in the aftermath.
Then comes the question, who's to blame? Lawsuits start piling up. Ultimately, around 100 lawsuits get bundled into what's basically one giant case, one of the first major class action style suits in Massachusetts. On one side, you have U.S. Industrial Alcohol saying things like, maybe anarchists blew up the tank, which, from what I've seen in the historical record, was their attempt to blame it on political radicals, rather than on, their own bad tank. On the other side, you've got families who lost loved ones, injured workers, and local businesses that were wrecked. The case drags on for years. There are thousands of pages of testimony, engineers, eyewitnesses, company employees. An auditor named Hugh Ogden is appointed to sort it all out. He listens, he reviews reports, he looks at the physical evidence. After about 5 years, the conclusion comes down. The tank failure was due to structural weakness and the company's negligence, not a bomb. The company is found liable and ordered to pay damages, roughly $600,000 plus in total at the time, which would be many millions in today's money. Families of those who died receive payouts. Businesses get some compensation. It's obviously not enough to fix the loss, but it's a legal acknowledgement that you can't just drop a dangerous industrial structure into a neighborhood and shrug when it goes wrong. One big lasting impact is on safety and building regulations. The Great Molasses Flood becomes a kind of textbook example, literally in some engineering courses, of why you need proper design, oversight, and inspections. Cities and states begin tightening rules. You start seeing more requirements that engineers sign off on major structures, that companies can't just slap together giant tanks without proof that they're safe. It helps push the US further toward the idea that public safety isn't optional paperwork. It's the price of doing business. If you go to that spot in the North End today, you won't find a giant tank, obviously. The area was rebuilt, and now it's largely a park, Langone Park, and the surrounding ball fields. Kids play baseball where the wave once rolled through. There's a small plaque that quietly tells the story of the Great Molasses Flood. No giant monument, no syrup fountain. Just this understated reminder that, on this very ordinary patch of grass, a very not ordinary disaster once unfolded. It's certainly a weird story. Sticky and darkly funny in places, molasses of all things. But underneath that is a serious lesson about what happens when profit outruns responsibility. People in 1919 Boston paid for that with their lives. So next time you drizzle molasses on something or walk past some big industrial structure you barely notice, somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this story of the day a city was knocked over by a wave of syrup and the changes that came because of it. That's it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me on A Point in Time for this strange little slice of history.